Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to bring to the committee, amidst the chaos and the shock and the horror that so many Canadians experienced over the course of the week with regards to the terror attack last Saturday in Israel. A memo from the CBC was quietly circulated, not so quiet because it became public. And it was telling journalists to avoid the word terrorist when referring to Hamas fighters in their publication. So for those on the committee, and I think most Canadians know this by now, but Hamas has been a recognized terrorist organization in this country for over 20 years. And the memo that was leaked reads as follows: do not refer to militant soldiers or anyone else as terrorists. And do not was emphasized in bold letters. And there's more in that memo. The notion of terrorism remains heavily politicized and is part of the story, even when quoting or clipping a government or a source referring to fighters as, quote, terrorists. We should add context to ensure the audience understands that this is opinion and not fact. And that includes statements from the Canadian government and Canadian politicians. So the question really is, Mr. Chair, if the Canadian government recognizes Hamas as a terrorist organization, and rightfully should, and if you've read what the Canadian government says about that organization, you would quite understand why they were so definitively listed as a terrorist organization. And if you further looked at the Hamas Covenant or the revised charter from 1988, it is clear Hamas has been clear on their genocidal intentions. So the memo was circulated by a gentleman named George Atchie, and he's the director of journalistic standards at the CBC, which of course gets a fair share of Canadian tax dollars. And we would simply like to know why that direction of opinion was put forward by the CBC. They are, after all, a news organization that Canadians pay for, so we would expect that they would get news. So given that Hamas has been declared a terrorist organization by the Government of Canada since 2002, and that the horrific Hamas terrorist attacks against Israel left thousands of innocent people dead and injured, and that an email directive was sent from the Director of Journalistic Standards of CBC News, Mr. George Atchie, to all employees of CBC News, directing them to downplay the coverage of the horrific, sadistic violence perpetrated by Hamas against innocent people in Israel by not referring to the attackers as terrorists and falsely claiming that Gaza continued to be under occupation after Israel had pulled out in 2005. And given that the CBC receives, $1.4 billion in public funding through taxpayer dollars annually, and that this committee has a mandate to review government expenditure, I believe that the committee should denounce Mr. Atchie's comments and report to the House. Summon the president of CBC, Catherine Tate, to appear for 2 hours by herself. Within 7 days of this motion hopefully being adopted by the Liberals and the NDP on this committee, summon the Director of Journalistic Standards, Mr. George Atchie, and invite, of course, the CBC Ombudsman, Mr. Jack Nagler, to appear for a minimum of 2 hours to address the CBC's position on journalistic standards and practices. That is the motion that I'd like to put forward in the committee, Mr. Chair, and with that, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you.